Well, do you believe it's states' right to secession? And if so, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And if so, what would be the reasons?
I would not be in favor of states seceding.
For what reasons?
I don't think it's in the best interest of either the states or the union. The answer to our nation's problems is not secession. It's to get up and fight and make changes so that it's better. We will be better off as part of the United States than not part of the United States.
But
we have an obligation to work to achieve that goal.
But why would New Hampshire, that say has a relatively solid economy that is nowhere close to that of California's? Why would we want to have any correlation with California making nothing to try to get started? If we're being fiscally responsible, and you really beat the fiscal responsibility of your own, why wouldn't we want to do something like that?
I believe in the United States. I don't believe in the United States minus this state because we don't like that state. Our country is doomed if it starts to break up. We became the United States over 200 years, 220 years.
Powered by the states, though, correct?
Correct.
The United States was a byproduct of the independent states.
That's correct.
Okay, so let's just understand where the power comes from.
You certainly have the right to debate whether or not you believe that the state should secede, but I don't support that. I just don't. It's fundamentally wrong, and I think that the United States should remain a united country, and that if people in states have objection to other states or to the system in Washington, we have an obligation to change it, not flee from it.
So Arizona, for example, if an injunction comes down, which is something that we all understand is a severe problem in Arizona, would you find that something that would be contrary to your beliefs that the federal government isn't doing what we ask them, what they are supposed to be doing?
Well, they're not doing what we think they should do, but they're doing what they perceive a majority of Americans think they should do, and we will change that. That's the way the system works. If it doesn't work, then we have what I would characterize as political instability, and that is very serious. Sir?
Well, with the particular issue of the Arizona border, I don't think that statement is necessarily correct. They're doing what they believe the majority of Americans think they should do. The Constitution plainly says that they are supposed to defend our national security. So when they're allowing terrorists to come across the border, I don't, frankly,
I agree with you on that.
That's the
I agree with you.
obligation.
I agree.
My follow-up, though, along the same lines, though, is you mentioned the committee for identifying possibilities to reduce expenditures. I'd like to suggest that if the federal government was operating with the perspective that it's supposed to be confined by guidelines set forth in the Constitution, we wouldn't have spending problems. So if you were to go back to the Senate, how would you make sure that the federal government is sailing with the rudder of the Constitution? Right now, I feel like our federal government's just kind of floating out there, and who knows where it's going to go because they've completely disregarded the Constitution.
Well, the recommendation that I just made a minute ago will be, it is a substantive and productive way of reducing the size of the federal government, the scope and the reach that it has. I object, just as you do, I know, to what's happened over the last 16 or 18 months in terms of the general relationship between government and people it governs. I would vote to repeal and the health care reform bill and replace it with more competition and a more private health care system than exists even today. I would never have supported the stimulus bill, or as Bill Binney said a minute ago, the bailouts for U.S. industry. If I wanted to share General Motors stock, I would have bought it myself on the stock exchange, but I don't. So I don't think that, I think it's very legitimate to use the, and albeit crucial, for a member of Congress to consider the Constitution to be the prime motivation, justification, and duty to uphold. The way to do that is to try to reduce the size and scope of government. It's one of the many things. Yes, sir.
You think it's my feeling, and I never felt like this before, that the idea is, we've had problems with the government, we've had presidents we liked and didn't like, and, and we got, we had the 4 years of changing, but it almost seems like we get to a point where this idiot, another 2 years down there, he literally destroyed the country. And, I'm thinking maybe we'd be better off with a system like England where we can get rid of them before the 4 years are up.
Parliamentary system of government. The only answer that I can give to that frustration is that in November, this district will elect the replacement for Paul Hodes. The very first vote that is cast by me will be for a Republican for Speaker of the House. Either of the 2 people running on the other side will vote for Nancy Pelosi to be the next leader. What follows on that vote will influence everything that happens over the next 2 years. So it should be our objective to make sure that we nominate the candidate who's most likely to win in November. You guys can make that choice.
There's one good thing that's come out of this whole thing. And making me feel like an idiot like me to run for something. When I say that, some of the people that have gone with the place, I'm not very political. It's like one of the first things I kind of do. But I think what really bothers me about the whole political system is when I watch it on TV and I see politicians in Washington making America look stupid by what they said. And every time it's like steroids and sports, they bring these people in and I think they want FaceTime. Some of the stuff that comes out of their mouth almost makes me feel like embarrassed to be an American because they say so many stupid things. And you know what I mean? It's almost like a direction of the government.
I don't think that's changed in 200 years. It's just that we've got C-SPAN now and you can see everything that everybody does. Well, thank you very much, you guys. Have a great evening, and I appreciate your attention and your support.
Thanks, Charlie. Let's see if there's anything else here. One thing everybody should be aware of, as far as what's happening, if anybody over the weekend watched or got into that network stuff that's going on, where they had 2,000 bloggers come out of their basement for the first time in almost 18 months and got together in one big room. And you have Obama apologizing to his base that he hasn't done enough for them yet, because the people who were at Netroots were the same people a month ago who were throwing books, shoes, anything that you could find at Nancy Pelosi while she was up at the podium, because they feel that you're not bringing the changes that on their agenda quick enough. One thing people should really realize is some of the words they use. Whenever you hear that Obama wants to fundamentally transform America, the word transform was originally used by Karl Marx in Marxism, and back in his the word in his language meant revolution. So when you hear that we're going to fundamentally change America, what Obama's doing is he's calling out to his base for a revolution to change America. I mean, I don't know if anybody has seen on Fox News, because it's the only people that covered it, new Black Panthers re-emerging, claiming that they hate crackers, they hate all crackers, and they hate cracker women and hate cracker babies, because the babies are just going to grow up and they're going to be the oppressors of black people when they get older. Then you get Storm with Van Jones, and he's basically saying the same thing, that you have to kill all the cops first before you can have a revolution, so the people won't have anybody there to defend themselves.
I got news for him.
And he's public about that. But then you go back to, there's been some new documents in circulation now that I've been emailing a lot, which was the original manifesto for the Weatherman Underground. And he was calling for the same thing that Van Jones is calling in, but back in the 60s they called them pigs. So the word pig is in a manifesto, but Van Jones is basically saying the same thing, but he's going undercover as green, but green really means communism. that, you know, when he says we need green jobs, he's really talking about we need communist jobs, you know, that we need to have green energy. He's basically saying that we need to have communist energy. I mean, the green movement is not your friend. And the best example of that is to take a watermelon. Everybody knows that the watermelon's nice and green on the outside, but if you take a knife and split it in half, what do you have? You have a lot of red on the inside, which is the color of communism. So whenever you hear the green movement, it's just a very, very thin layer of green, because under it is 100% communism. And that's where they want to push us. If only England was to be our final stop to where they want us to be. They want to take us a lot further than England, unfortunately. And even in England now, they're admitting that their healthcare system is broke, and they're going to be eliminating a lot of services like hip replacements that are pretty common, and prostate cancer, that's pretty easy to cure. A lot of basic services now they're going to be discontinuing, and they're looking to get the healthcare system back into the private sector. And this is what I mean, I don't know how many times, how many countries we can look around to see what a failure healthcare is. There's never been a successful socialized government that's centrally planned by the government. There's never been a successful healthcare system that's run by the government. And there's never been any successful businesses run by the government either. But Obama and his educated Harvard friends seem to think that they have the right recipe this time around, which they don't, because the present and the future is nothing more than a mirror of the past. If you can take the past and just mirror it, that's our present and future. History will repeat itself. And each time it does, it goes more extreme on each way that it repeats. And even with back when Sal Alinsky first came out of his book, Rules for Radicals, they actually had to change the name of the book because they were afraid no one was going to buy it, it would scare the public. But when Sal Alinsky first wanted to have his book published, it was originally meant to be called Rules for a Revolution. And they took out the word revolution and put radicals in it because they were afraid that it would stir up too much controversy. And now they're trying to make that as a mandate for people to read in high school. So when they get out of high school, they know what their next job is, acorn. And other than that, I think we're pretty much all done. And if, I don't know if Charlie is still here or if he took off. But there's no hurry to get out. If say if Charlie was here or Bill is here, you can ask some questions, but I think they might have both taken off.
Establish.
That's good. That's our job, though. It's our job to hold their feet to the fire, and I don't think there was any rude questions that were out of line.
I saw a bump sticker the other day that said, from Little Acorn to Mighty Marxist Home.
Exactly. Amen.